belonging to another. A person could pick up a piece of somebody's property, a wallet, for example, of a person, and thinking it's his own. He made a mistake. In fact, the wallet or the purse belongs to somebody else. Now, a person can be excused for that. Did not intend. But the person did not intend to do that. And so it is also with most of the Noahide prohibitions that a person can do an act mistakenly. However, if a person kills another person mistakenly, without intention, the person is still liable. Except maybe in the most freakish of circumstances. It could be maybe there are some circumstances which are so unexpected and so, I mean, if somebody, for example, jumps in front of my car when I'm driving it, well, that's not my fault. I could nothing. But if a person was driving the car and carelessly, unintentionally killed a person, even though the driver had no intention whatsoever to do that, the person is still liable, and that is called in English we call it manslaughter, as distinct from murder or homicide. So that's one area where we find that murder is particularly serious. Another area is that even if one causes a person to die indirectly, that's also a liable act. What do I mean? For example, a person can be killed through an intentional, conscious act, or a person could be killed indirectly. For example, just left to die. The person helpless and left to die without food, without the ability to save themselves, and so on and so forth. That's an act of murder. Now, unfortunately, we have a terrible example of that in Western societies, and maybe the other places as well, that sometimes a baby could survive an abortion, and even though the abortion itself is something which is prohibited. We'll talk about that later. But if the baby survives the abortion, then unfortunately there are many doctors who, and it may even be standard practice, I don't know, just to leave the baby to die. The baby cannot help itself. It may be crying, it may be breathing, and that baby is left to die. So that is even though that is indirect, there's indirect killing. By the way, Leo, this is coming. I don't know. Is it coming back through your speaker?
No.
It could be your microphone is on, and when I speak, the voice goes into yours and comes back to everybody. I don't know. Okay.
I think it's better, right?
Good.
Yeah.
That's better. Yeah. Okay. So that is a case where the baby was not killed by direct intervention, but it happened indirectly. The baby was left to die. Okay, I think somebody must have a microphone on. Okay, I can manage without this.
Hold on, Rabi.
Right,
I think hold on. I think I need to check. I don't know why with this, but let me check. All microphone is off.
Is your phone on?
No, all microphone is off. And then this one is also off. So not sure which one is it. Okay.
Okay. I can manage without it. Don't worry. I can continue anyway. But I don't know if it's disturbing other people. Okay. So there we find that concept of indirect killing is also killing. It's also called in Noahide law. It's also called killing. And so here we see the extreme severity of this of killing, which has a form which expresses itself in ways you don't find with other Noahide laws. So then, as we're going to see, there is so sometimes, I mean, we will see later on, but that doesn't mean there are certain circumstances where it is permitted to kill and where it's even mandatory to kill. But we'll see that has to do also. By the way, it's good now. No echo. It's good. Okay, but so that is a situation which we'll discuss in due course. Now, another area where we find the severity of killing expressed is in the objects, so to speak, of that killing. Now, to give you some examples, let us take the fetus, an unborn baby. Now, this unborn baby is clearly different from a living human being. It could not live by itself were it to be born. It is not yet fully formed. However, the Noahide law says that killing, even though the fetus is a completely dependent existence, and to some extent a potential existence, it hasn't yet fully formed. And also, it has these qualities of dependence on its mother. It has these qualities of being in a state of potential. Nevertheless, it is considered as an act of killing to destroy a fetus. We'll see there may be certain exceptions, but generally speaking, this is the case. So there again, you see the severity of killing. Also, there are certain cases where even where a person has been born, a living human being, and this human being has and this person is called what's called a treifa. The person has a physical defect, which means that the person is going to die. And he may not actually be dying in a state of dying now, but this is a person whose life expectancy is short, and therefore this person can be expected to die ahead of time. It is also prohibited to kill such a person. So long as this person is alive, it is an act for prohibited killing to kill such a person. Another example is the situation which we find at the end of life. Sometimes people suffering from an incurable illness. Now, there's not here, we find it's not that there is a defect in the person himself, but just that the person is being consumed by an illness. And it's here too, to the idea that even though this person is suffering, unfortunately, and has a very limited expectation of time left to live, it is completely prohibited, and it's act of killing to do anything to shorten that life. Now, we can have a whole discussion here about things like morphine and issues like that. That's a separate discussion. But what we have now in many Western countries, the idea that the person can be given an injection, heaven forbid, and actually executed through that injection, that is an act of killing under Noahide law. So, in other words, even though where the severity of killing is seen in Noahide law, both in terms of the person doing, in other words, even the person didn't intend to, and even if it was done indirectly, and also in terms of the object of killing, even though it's a fetus, even though it's a person with little prospect, who was born but has little prospect of living, or is at the end of his life or her life from a terminal illness, that's all. These objects are also objects of killing. It's also prohibited. So here you see how serious a matter this is, and unfortunately, in the West at least, and in other parts where we have terrorism, this is not understood. In fact, it is an amazing paradox that certain cultures which call themselves religious can advocate for terrorism again, and the destruction of innocent human beings. I don't believe that these people are really religious. I know this is not an attack on Islam. I know that there are many good people in Islam, but the terrorist organizations which call themselves organizations of believing people, they are outright murderers, and their religion is just a facade or is a self-delusion as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not saying that about ordinary Muslim people. I think ordinary Muslim people don't do that. But the terrorists who do it, there's something that their religion is wrong, because they are actually striking. When they kill innocent human beings, they are striking at the image of God, which is implanted in the human being. Now, do you think, shall we ask if there are any questions at this point, Leo? And then I can go to the next section.
Oke, Bapak Ibu Saudara sekalian, sampai di sini tadi terkait dengan apakah itu disengaja, tidak disengaja, lalu objeknya, lalu berbagai macam tadi hal aturan yang kita bahas terkait dengan larangan membunuh, tadi Rabi sudah jelaskan. Apakah ada pertanyaan? Silakan jika ada pertanyaan, jika ingin mengajukan pertanyaan, silakan bisa di-unmute lalu diucapkan pertanyaannya. Ayo cepat.
Saya mau tanya, Mure.
Silakan Pak Jen.
Apakah kalau sebentar, Mure.
Yuk.
Apakah kalau kita menyumpahi orang atau mengutuki orang untuk mati, dan kebetulan itu terjadi, itu apakah termasuk dalam pembunuhan gitu? Begitu, Bu Rai. Terima kasih.
Itu saja. Oke. So, Rabi, what about if we curse someone? If maybe I myself have hated someone and then I curse someone else, and then I curse to death. I said, may God kill you with whatever means, something like that, with thunder, with whatever it is, right? So, and then that's happened. Apparently that's happened. This person and whatever mean it is, then that person being cursed is died. So is it considered as an act of murder according to the 7 Noahide laws, or how can you explain that, Rabbi?
A very good question. I have never been asked that question before, and I have to think about it. I don't want to rush out and answer it. I know in Torah there is a prohibition to curse. For Jews, there is a prohibition to curse another Jew, and that is not considered as that's not punishable. That's not punishable as an act of murder. Now, and the fact of cursing one's own parents is a very serious offence. It is a capital offence. We don't have a capital offence except in the temple stand, but it is a capital offence to curse parents. It is not classed as killing. in Torah. It is so. The answer is it is obviously it is a serious matter, but it is not the same as murder, and you can see that from Jewish law. So clearly, I think you can say, therefore, that to curse, I know people. You might say it's only words, but I know that words can have effect. There's no question about it. But it is so. I think we would have to say that to curse an innocent human being should be a prohibited act, but it is not punishable as killing. It's not. I mean, but it's a good question. I hope I've answered it to some extent. It is a bad thing, but it is not. It's not punishable as killing.
Okay. All right. Very clear, Rabbi. You may continue with your topics.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. A good question. All right. Now, so let's talk about. Let us now talk about. I mentioned before that to hire. What about? I mean, this is we said before that killing a person, even indirectly, is also prohibited. You know, we said, for example, leaving a baby to die would be an act of killing. However, what about in the situation where a person hires? I mean, so it's a very unpleasant topic, but hires another person to kill. Now, is that considered as an act of killing? Now, you may think that this is something which goes on in the underworld. This is something which criminals involved. They hire people to kill. Obviously, so the answer is there's a discussion there as to whether the person who hired is liable or the person who killed is hired. Is it the person who did the job? Is it the person who hired? So I think the basic ruling is that the person who is actually liable for that killing is the person who carried it out. But there's no question that the person who did the hiring has a very strong element of guilt, and society can justly punish a person who's hired, as distinct from who carried it out. Now, unfortunately, this has a real application in Western society. And for example, I will tell you that in some legislation, which was done in Australia and other societies, regarding abortion. Now, what happened there was that the doctors, the legislation made it permitted people to kill babies on demand up to a certain number of weeks, whatever it was, 22 weeks. Now that's of course completely prohibited under Noahide law. The legislation, however, also gave a right to doctors to refuse to do an abortion. But at the same time, it compelled that doctor who refused to perform it to give her the address and to give a referral to another doctor who would do it. Now that is a major problem, because that forces the first doctor to be complicit. In other words, to be involved in the actual killing by the second doctor. So that is a very serious matter. It is not only the same thing as hiring another person, but it is making possible. It is facilitating a killing by a second doctor. So that is that's another case there where we have a real problem in Noahide law in this legislation, and it's very wrong. This idea of complicity. So this is an area where this is an area where there's an important application of Noahide law. Okay. Now, what about suicide? Now, suicide, there's actually a debate in Noahide law about suicide, but the ruling is, that's the way I think Rabbi Moshe Weiner, and that's the way I see it coming out from the poskim myself. That's how I also believe the halacha to be. Is that it is suicide is prohibited. Now, it's interesting that there's a very interesting discussion, explanation of this, and it says that where do we find that the Torah prohibits suicide? So it does so after there's a verse of the Torah which says I won't. I mean, in Hebrew it says I will a person anyway. Whatever the verse is learnt to mean that if a person takes their own life, this is something which God will punish, and it comes straight after the permission which God gave to Noah to kill animals in order to eat them. We know that up to the time of Noah, people were not allowed to kill animals in order to eat animals. So after the flood, God gave permission to humanity to kill animals in order to eat them. So a person might think, I have animals. I'm allowed to kill them in order to eat them for my own benefit. Maybe my own body is the same. Just like I can kill my animals, I could also destroy my own body for my benefit. You know, to relieve myself from misery or something like that. So here the Torah says, no, it's different. Your animals were given to you for your needs. Obviously, we have to treat them humanely, but they were given. You are permitted to slaughter animals in order to eat them. But your own life, you have no jurisdiction over your own life. You have no authority over your own life. And the verse goes on to say, because the human being was made in the image of God. The human being has a soul which has been granted and has divine characteristics. And therefore it is sacrosanct, it is holy. It cannot be destroyed. And that, of course, relates to one's own. We are not allowed to harm our bodies, because our bodies are not our permission, are not our possession. We're not allowed, a person's not allowed, for example, even to shame his own body. Let us supposing a person would say, in order to raise money, that he would let people throw things at him. It's a very ugly profession. It allow a person to throw objects at him for payment. That is prohibited. We are not allowed to harm or to shame our own bodies, because our bodies and our lives are it's divine property. Obviously, we are allowed, for example, let us say, if it is for health reasons, a person can have an amputation of a limb if that's necessary to save it, or sometimes, the question arises, women have their ears pierced, right? They have their ears pierced. That also is that is also a form of bloodletting, but that is not for a destructive purpose. That is, if that is done because they regard that in order to wear earrings, they will be beautified, that is permitted. But any form of destructive conduct towards one's own life or body is prohibited. So that is the foundation of the prohibition of suicide. And unfortunately, in many Western countries now, we have what is called physician-assisted suicide, and this is totally prohibited. It is totally prohibited under Noahide law. Now, first of all, any questions on that before we go ahead?
Oke, Bapak Ibu sekalian, terkait dengan kita bahas tadi sedikit ya tentang bunuh diri dan juga tentang melukai diri. Nah, tadi Rabi sudah menjelaskan. Sekarang apakah ada pertanyaan dari Bapak Ibu sekalian terkait dengan poin bunuh diri dan melukai diri sendiri ini? Yang jelas dilarang dalam 7 hukum Nuh. Rabi, there's a question. Oke, Pak Johan, silakan Pak Johan dulu.
Ketanya yang tadi sebelumnya Pak, kalau misalnya yang suntik mati, itu kalau kasusnya untuk hewan peliharaan gimana Pak? Kan seringnya yang petnya udah terlalu tua, terus karena terlalu sakit-sakitan orang nggak tega dulu.
Okay, the question is about euthanasia, but to the pet, Rabi. It's not to the human. To the human, it is very clear, it is prohibited. How about to the pet? Because we feel that we feel pity for the pet. It's too old, very ill, something like that. We just want to end the misery of our own pets. Are we allowed to do that? To euthanasia our pet?
The answer to that is yes. The reason is that the animal world is given to the human being for a human benefit. Obviously, it has to be an ethical benefit. But animals may be treated. Animals are. We're allowed to kill an animal to eat it, right? That's one thing. See that? Obviously, an animal needs to be killed in a humane fashion. We're allowed to, if a person has, if there's an insect or a spider, you can kill it. There's no question, because the insect or the spider or the fly is something which is causing the human being distress. In other words, there is a valid human purpose in killing that animal. Now, in the case of a pet, in the case of an animal, if the animal is burdensome for the human being to take care of a sick animal, then on those grounds a person is allowed to have the animal euthanized or killed. Put down, as we say in English, they put down is the expression they use. It is permitted. So in other words, so basically the condition there is that it serves a human purpose. It becomes difficult and difficult for the human being to care for a sick animal. So the answer is yes, because it's a human need. Now, it's a very interesting question which is asked. And that is, what happens if you see an animal which has been wounded? It's not your animal. It's not something that you have to look after. But the animal is suffering. Let's say it was an animal which was hit by a car, and on the side of the road, it was an animal which nobody owned, or a bird which nobody owned. Should one go and kill that animal out of pity for the animal? In other words, it's nothing to do with me. It's not my animal. The animal doesn't have. The animal is. I am not obligated to care for that animal. It's not my animal. should I nevertheless go and kill that animal out of a sense of pity for that animal itself? And Rabbi Weiner says it's questionable whether you are allowed, because if this animal is not your animal, are you the judge of the life of an animal to decide whether it should live or not? I mean, because then people could say, well, maybe a whole species should be killed. I don't know, of animals. Are we the judge of whether animals should live or not? But one thing Noahide law does say to us, is if it relates to your needs. You are a human being. You have a purpose in life. You have obligations, and now the animals which you possess, the animals with which you have to do are animals which you eat, animals which may be pets. Whatever it is, they give you a sense of well-being. You enjoy their cut. You enjoy having a pet, an animal or something like that, or there are animals which work for you, like horses or cows, or whatever it is. What the Torah does clearly say is that if these animals if it now becomes burdensome for you to care for these, in other words, to care for a sick animal, you are allowed to have it put down, because it relates to your work and to your conduct, to the human being's conduct in the world. And that's what we're concerned. How is the animal serving your purpose? And remember, your purpose is not a selfish purpose. Your purpose is to be a good human being, to serve God. But having a sick animal is something which may slow me down and prevent me from doing other things which I need to do. So therefore, under those circumstances, what is permitted? It's if it is a burden on me as a human being, I am allowed to have a sick animal destroyed. So, but we will learn later on that the Torah is also, in the Noahide laws, I do care about treating animals properly, but when it comes to valid human needs, then animals can be used or disposed of to satisfy valid human needs.
Oke. Saya persingkat. Jadi jika memang itu hewan piaraan kita, maka dan itu ternyata akhirnya karena dia sakit mengganggu kita nggak bisa bekerja, kita nggak bisa mungkin harus mengeluarkan uang banyak, itu kan mengganggu kita ya. Mungkin uangnya itu harusnya bisa buat sedekah, tetapi harus mengurus binatang, maka boleh diakhiri hidupnya. Nah tadi jika yang ketemu di pinggir jalan, misalkan udah sekarat, kita kan itu kan bukan milik kita, maka Rabbi Weiner berkata kita nggak boleh jadi hakim, jangan menghakimi binatang seperti itu aja karena nggak ada hubungannya dengan kita. Dia hidup pun kita nggak terpengaruh, itu binatang yang tergeletak di pinggir jalan mati pun kita nggak terpengaruh, gitu kan, seperti itu. Oke. Next question, Rabbi, about putting harm. This is basically related to put our body into harm. So how about plastic surgery and tattoo, for example? Those two things. Is it allowed for us as a Noahide?
You said, what was the second thing? You mentioned plastic surgery. What was the second thing?
Tattoo.
Tattoos.
Yes.
Okay. Well, okay. So the first thing is, let me just ask you about the tattoos. What are the reasons why people have tattoos in Indonesia? Is it just like you have in the West because they think it looks good? Or is there another reason for having tattoos? Why
yes. They view it as a good, and then it's in a form of art as well. That's what the people feel here.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now the first thing, plastic surgery. So far as I know, it is permitted because it has a constructive purpose. Whereas just like having your ear, normally we say you're not allowed to spill blood. Not only should we not kill, we shouldn't cause bloodshed. But if having a woman having her ear pierced, that causes blood, that could cause some bleeding, but that is a constructive thing. It is for her personal enhancement. So I would say along those lines, the plastic surgery, it should also be permitted. Okay, it's also allowed. Now, because it's not destructive, it's constructive. Now, as far as tattoos are concerned, I think that about this, the way I see tattoos in Australia, I see that the tattoos are part of a culture which is actually detached from God. It's not idolatry. The people who are wearing tattoos are not necessarily idolaters, but it is something which is associated with a subculture, with a culture, which in my view is not a very elevated culture, not a very refined culture. I don't know, there's something which we call in the West punks, punks, where they have lots of, piercings, they have rings, they have piercings in their nose, piercings in their, all over their body, they have different piercings in their lips with things, and they do this because they think it's attractive. Really, it is part of I think, a degenerate subculture. Even though it's common, a lot of people have them. It is something which is associated with in my view, a retrograde culture, a low culture, a low culture. And I think we could say in Jewish law, we speak about Darkei Amiri. In other words, people who there is also the ways of showing off with various cultural phenomena in ways which are far from the proper service of God, far from it. A culture which is degenerate culture. And I believe that a lot of these tattoos and and facial piercing, body piercing, and rings in the lips and the nose and everything of that stuff. I mean, in the Bible, they did wear nose rings. It was once upon a time a legitimate thing. I think it may be that even the mothers of the matriarchs had rings in their nose. But it was in that time, it was an acceptable. It was an acceptable form of ornamentation, which was not associated with a subculture. It was normal. The tattooing and the piercings and so on and so forth, and the rings and the lips and the nose all over the place. This is a degenerate culture, and for that reason, I think it should be prohibited. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Rabbi. So I think
it's not. Let me get it. It's not a serious. It's not like stealing. It's not like killing. It's not like the other things. You can't say that they've done something which is which deserves punishment. But it is a negative phenomenon. It's a retrograde phenomenon.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so let's continue.
Yeah.
Now, we know, up till now, we've been discussing all sorts of killing which is prohibited. The question now arises, when is killing permitted? And not only when is it permitted, when is it required? So there is a situation. There are several situations here, because we have to understand that life. When we say that life is sacred, it doesn't mean that killing is forbidden under all circumstances. God sometimes requires us to do this act, and we'll see where that is. So for example, one situation is where a person is called upon to, or threatened, that if they don't kill somebody, they themselves will be killed. They're told, kill this innocent person, kill this person, or we will kill you. Now, in Noahide law, generally speaking, we say that if a person's life is in danger, a person may transgress laws. For example, supposing a person is starving to death in a serious situation, and the person has to steal something in order to survive. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't want, this should not become a way of life, heaven forbid. But it could happen. A person could be starving. It could be a person could have been, you know, captured and put somewhere and be starving. A person then may steal food. Obviously, not if it's going to kill somebody else to die. We don't want to do it, but may steal something in order to live. Of course, the intention has to be to pay for it, or to make restitution when it becomes possible, to replace it. But a person may transgress in order to live. And so the Noahide laws, if a person is told, transgress this Noahide law or we will kill you, then the general rule is the person transgresses. But there is an exception. And the exception is when the person tells, kill somebody or we'll kill you. Then you're not allowed. Then a person must rather lay down one's own life rather than kill somebody else. Because who says your life is more worthy than their life? Then is your blood redder than their blood? In other words, and so forth. There you can't. Okay. So that's the exception. You're not, even if your own life is threatened, you're not allowed to kill another innocent human being. A person must rather allow oneself to be killed rather than transgress that. Now, what about? Then there is also the issue of killing in self-defense. There is no question that if somebody tries to kill oneself, that one may kill the other person in self-defense. In fact, that is the foundation, that is the justification for war. That when a country is attacked by another country, it may defend itself, and that defense can involve killing other people. But we're seeing a very interesting idea here, and I'll elaborate this more, is that actually why does one kill in this case? To save life. In other words, the killing is permissible to save life. It sounds like a paradox, but that's what it is. So to kill in self-defense is permitted. That's the foundation for war. Even a preemptive strike might be necessary sometimes. In other words, if a missile is being fired, I don't have to wait for the missile to hit. I can attack preemptively also to stop it happening. That's also defensive war. And not only that, it's not only in self-defense. And then, say, for example, if I find somebody endangering my life here, even without war, I'm allowed to kill that person. Obviously, I must try to do everything I can to save myself without killing. That's why the police, first of all, they should shoot a person in the leg. They shouldn't shoot the person to kill the person. You have to try, if you can stop a person without taking their life, then taking their life could be murder. But in self-defense. And not only that, a third party. If you see somebody chasing somebody else to kill them, you are also permitted, and some say you are obligated, to stop the pursuer, the person who is pursuing another person to kill them, even if it means taking their life. In other words, not only in self-defense, but in defense of a third person, another person also, that's also permitted. Now this, in fact, also is the foundation of the permission for abortion in rare cases. That the life of a baby, if the baby is threatening its mother's life, I mean, it's unlikely, it is rare these days that it would happen. But if a woman is in danger, if a woman could die as a result of a pregnancy, then it is permitted to abort the baby. Because the baby, even though the baby doesn't do it intentionally, the baby is a pursuer on the life of the mother. But once the baby's head, so to speak, is emerged from the womb, then we can't, then that's also another human being. We can't push away one because of the other. So what we see here then is that the taking of life is very serious. And we mentioned all of those ways which bring out its seriousness, but we see also that where the Torah, where the Noahide laws do give permission to take life, that is actually to save life in self-defense, in the life of another person, the life of the mother, or in war to save one's own life. So these are the only situations that are here. So the Noahide law is very concerned with the protection of life, and that's frames, if you like, holding. And we must always remember too that what life is, that life has within it the image of God. And that is why, and that gives it its extreme, that's what makes the killing so severe a transgression. Okay, well, Leo, we'll have to finish very soon, but in a few minutes, we can have the questions on this or anything else, if anybody would like to ask any other questions.
Yeah, there's one question from chat here, and I'll just read it for you. In the case of suicide, is it a negative act, a merely negative act, or is it transgressing the 7 Noahide laws?
Okay. Well, I don't know if I understand the question completely, but we know that there are people who are sometimes mentally ill. So a mental illness, unfortunately, can lead to suicide. We are not going to judge a person who had mental illness, severe mental illness, as having done a serious transgression.
Okay.
Obviously, we want to help such a person to overcome the depression or whatever it is.
Okay.
But if a person does consciously commit suicide, the person has committed and they have some element of choice left. They are not so ill that they can't choose. Then they have done a very serious transgression. It is a very serious matter. But once again, as I say, in many cases, people who do commit suicide have been overwhelmed by mental illness, and that would lead us. It's a tragedy. It's a bad thing, but it doesn't mean, therefore, that we don't have pity on them. And it doesn't mean, therefore, that we don't give them a proper burial. You know, they are human beings who are overpowered by illness.
Yeah.
So, but we should know that the idea that a person who is not ill should commit suicide for some reason just to escape pain or to escape unhappiness, to kill oneself in that situation is a transgression, clear transgression.
What happened to that person if, like, what happened to the soul of the person that committed suicide with the health, mental, no mental illness whatsoever? What will gonna happen to the soul, Rabbi?
I would say that I don't think that they would have a place in the world to come. I'm sorry to say, I do not think so, because it is a very severe transgression.
Wow. Okay.
And we have to, and that is why we have, and that's why we have to That's why we have to stop it. It's like killing somebody else.
Yeah.
Killing oneself and killing somebody else is the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. I understand, Rabbi. All right.
Okay.
Wonderful.
But if that person had a severe illness, then maybe as I say, maybe we could somehow, that soul could still be saved. Perhaps, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. All right. So Rabbi, I think that's good, and thank you so much. Maybe you can say a bracha for us, a blessing for us before you leave us. That will be
okay. Most certainly. I want to bless you all. That you should that we should all be happy that we are alive. In other words, one of the greatest, the fundamental joy should be that we are alive and able to serve God.
Amen.
This itself should be a source of joy to us, and to know that as long as we live, as long as we breathe, we can serve God.
Amen.
And even a person who unfortunately is terribly ill or in a very bad situation, that person still with his or her thoughts and speech and action are still privileged to serve God and to be close to God. So yes. If we have life, that itself should be a reason for joy. And please God, all of your lives should be filled with joy. May God remove all sadness from your lives and fill it with happiness.
Amen. Toda Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
All the very best. See you next week, please. Goodness.
See you next week, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Oke, Bapak, Ibu, Saudara sekalian, saya akan lanjutkan dengan terjemahan dari jawaban Rabbi tadi ya. Nah, terkait dengan bunuh diri, itu adalah sebuah tindakan yang sangat-sangat mengerikan dan sangat-sangat dilarang, sangat-sangat tidak boleh gitu ya. Kecuali memang orang itu ada gangguan mental. Kalau ada gangguan mental kita nggak bisa bilang ya. Karena kadang-kadang orang yang dengan gangguan mental kan bisa tiba-tiba istilahnya ya tidak terkontrol hidupnya, bahkan juga bisa membahayakan diri sendiri gitu kan. Tetapi jika orang itu masih memiliki pikiran yang benar, masih memiliki tidak ada gangguan mental gitulah, itu justru tidak boleh, itu nggak boleh. Karena apa? Sekali lagi tadi Rabbi sudah menjelaskan dari awal bahwa manusia itu hidupnya itu milik Tuhan. Jadi bahkan diri kita sendiri kita bukan pemilik daripada tubuh kita ini sendiri. Kehidupan kita pribadi saja, hidup kita ini itu bukan milik kita, tetapi milik Tuhan. Maka dari itu kita nggak boleh secara serampangan memperlakukan diri kita, memperlakukan tubuh kita. Tadi Rabbi udah menjelaskan nggak boleh sembarangan melukai diri, segala macam. Kalau tidak ada manfaat yang jelas gitu ya. Kalau manfaatnya jelas untuk kesehatan, ada sakit di bagian dalam gitu ya, harus dioperasi, silakan. Itu adalah untuk manfaat kesehatan. Termasuk tadi juga dengan anting-anting, dengan perhiasan, operasi plastik, ada manfaat kesehatannya, silahkan lakukan gitu kan, yang jelas seperti itu. Nah jadi maka dari itu bunuh diri itu sangat-sangat mengerikan dan sangat-sangat berbahaya dan tidak boleh dilakukan Bapak-Ibu sekalian. Tadi saya sempat tanyakan berikutnya, bagaimana apa yang terjadi dengan jiwa atau neshama daripada orang yang melakukan bunuh diri. Rabbi berkata dengan jelas bahwa menurut pendapat beliau, saya tidak yakin bahwa orang tersebut nanti akan mendapatkan tempat di alam haba. Orang yang melakukan tindakan bunuh diri, Rabbi tidak yakin. Artinya boleh dikatakan bahwa ya boleh dikatakan sekitar 80% lah kalau seperti itu kan. Keraguannya cuma 20%. Bahwa orang yang dengan pikiran yang masih waras, masih sehat segala macam gitu Bapak-Ibu sekalian, Rabbi nggak yakin bahwa orang ini akan masuk ke alam haba. Artinya masuk kepada kehidupan berikutnya. Jadi ngeri sekali. Jadi jangan sampai kalau kita pun amit-amit ya, saya sih mudah-mudahan yang ngikutin Shiur ini yang bergabung bersama dengan kita semua di sini, saya harapkan semuanya oke, nggak ada bahkan niatan, keinginan untuk bunuh diri, jangan. Tapi bila mana kita melihat ada orang lain mencoba untuk bunuh diri, adalah sebuah mitzvah yang besar, adalah sebuah tindakan kebaikan yang sangat luar biasa jika kita bisa mencegahnya. Ya, oke, jadi seperti itu. Dan tadi Rabbi juga memberikan memberikan berakanya, memberikan blessingnya kepada kita Dan blessing-nya itu adalah terkait dengan 7 hukum Nuh yang kita pelajari saat ini, yaitu bahwa selama masih kita hidup, apapun kondisinya, bersyukurlah dan bersukacitalah. Dan Rabi juga berkata, biarlah hidup kita dipenuhi dengan sukacita. Tadi Rabi berkata dalam bagian akhirnya di dalam berkat yang diberikan kepada kita, selain Rabi memberikan kita juga mengharapkan bahwa hidup kita penuh dengan sukacita, penuh dengan kemanisan, semua segala macam. Tetapi jikapun ada di antara kita yang ada di kondisi bahwa dalam keadaan sakit atau segala macam yang tidak mengenakan, tetap bersukacita karena selama masih ada nafas, kalaupun katakanlah kita sakit tidak bisa bergerak, pikiran kita masih bisa kita gunakan untuk memuji Tuhan, pikiran kita bisa kita gunakan untuk melayani Tuhan. Setidaknya masih ada yang bisa kita lakukan untuk melayani Tuhan. Ya, jadi keep positif, senantiasa bersyukur bahwa kita hidup. Memang hidup tidak senantiasa mulus, ada yang harus kita hadapi, tapi percayalah Tuhan senantiasa beserta dengan kita. Oke? Baik, seperti itu saja Bapak Ibu sekalian. Semoga ini bisa menjadi kekuatan buat kita dan tentunya bisa lebih lagi mengerti bagaimana kita harus hidup di dunia ini, bagaimana kita memperlakukan diri kita, bagaimana kita memperlakukan orang lain, segala macam. Dan itulah tentunya hikmat dan juga pentingnya Torah untuk kita pelajari agar bisa menjadi tuntunan dalam hidup kita. Oke, terima kasih. Silakan kembali beraktivitas, Toda Rabah, dan sampai ketemu lagi di waktu yang akan datang, yaitu minggu depan. Toda Rabah. Shalom.
Toda Rabah.